Hello out there and good morning, traders. It is April 24th, 2024, and welcome to the Apteros Daily Market Insight. Let's start with our recap and head into what's going on for today. So, yesterday, not exactly the strongest DMI that we ever had. We knew that kind of going into the session. In the short term, we were more bullish. In the long term, we were a little bit more bearish. We were waiting for a decision to be made out of that area. Our main line in the sand was this upper one here, and kind of a rare situation where we ended up seeing some inflections from our line in the sand, but really going nowhere. We had a very bullish environment during the intraday session, and it just pushed right through our line in the sand. Once it started to hold above that area, opportunities to kind of go with that bullish pressure into the later afternoon session, but really nothing for us to do with a major pullback back into that line in the sand. So a little bit more scalpy of a session for us from yesterday. It was just one of those situations where we were looking at a battle between the upper time frames, the lower time frames. The lower time frames kind of had enough juice to push through those upper time frames and shift things a little bit here for us coming into today. So no specific like major opportunities. Scenario one really was best in this location here. After that, it broke down heading into scenario two. From there, your best opportunities were kind of scalping off of lows, according to intraday framework stuff, and that was it. So nothing really special from the DMI for us yesterday. Let's take a look at what's going on today. Okay, so today we have kind of a sticky situation again. So the narrative strength today and the context, not all that great. We do have a couple areas to watch, so it's really more about short-term information at this point. Because our upper time frames, all of them are in locations that really aren't contextually supportive. In other words, we don't really have clear indications on those time frames as to what's happening because we're in a transitional period in a lot of those time frames. The shorter time frames are kind of what we're leaning into a little bit more today. So with that being said, our main bullish line in the sand, this area here, is a condition that has been created from yesterday. So this is yesterday's kind of condition that we're following at this upper line in the sand here. And if that fails, right, so we have a general line in the sand expectation here. Scenario one being a hold of that area heading up into this main target zone. And then, of course, if we get a really bullish day, pushing out into this one would be a stretch target. Not necessarily an expectation, as this is the main target here for the up move, right? As to what we're seeing in the immediate bullish picture. If we get scenario two, things get a little bit tricky because we end up seeing the shorter time frames kind of going to the downside. But as we go lower and lower, the upper time frames look a little bit more bullish. Specifically, one of them looks a little bit more bullish overall with what we've been seeing in terms of the price and the patterning coming out of the lows from a couple days ago. So we enter into scenario two with the information that we're seeing fresh shifts on lower time frames, and we're looking for kind of this general area to push down into this general area here, right? And that's kind of what we're looking at with scenario two. And it's a little bit more short term in the expectations because we end up seeing kind of a back and forth between lower time frames and upper time frames. So this is what I was kind of mentioning earlier in the DMI here. The clarity is lacking across all of our time frames. Our lower time frames are a little bit more clear, especially in this upper area. But once this upper area, if this upper area gets tested and fails or something like that, the clarity in this zone becomes a little more difficult, a little bit more, back and forth between multiple time frames. So what you end up getting in this zone here is a little bit more of a lack of clarity below this upper area. And that can make for more short-term type of conditions, more short-term expectations, and so forth. If we hold up above, you could still pretty much have a little bit more of a longer-term expectation to up into this zone. If we get down below, it's a little bit more short-term in the expectations, and the quality of the narrative kind of breaks down a little bit more as well if we get below this upper line in the sand zone. And of course, we do have a lower area to pay attention to if the market, for some reason, is extremely bearish today and pushes all the way down to this zone. This would be the overall target for the short-term stuff shifting. And even though we are, in an area of lack of clarity, that doesn't mean we don't have expectations for the what is picture. If this upper area breaks down, the what is picture's expectation is a possible rotation down into here. And that's where we'll be monitoring for bullish activity coming down to those rotational lows there. And if they break, then you have way more downside possible heading back into kind of a bearish environment on the upper time frames as well. All right. So that is the general landscape of what's going on today, with our main line in the sand kind of in the middle of the expectations here, bullish up above, more clear in that scenario. And if we get down below, lacking clarity in terms of narrative strength and quality and all that stuff, but still an expectation that the shorter term stuff is failing and shifting, and therefore possible short term opportunities at the downside there. All right. Trade well out there, mind your process, and let's get after it.